Hello, everybody, and welcome to another amazing episode of Sphere of Being, where, as we know, as the theme is taking care of ourselves so that we can care for those around us, maybe at work, at home, within our communities, because, we put a lot of effort often into doing things for others, but it's very important, and I always say this, to put our oxygen masks on first, to make sure that we're abundant with energy, love, joy, so that we can give that unabated to people, but we must make sure that we've got enough fuel in the tank. And today, from first-hand experience, we have Karen Bashford, who has an amazing business empowering women to stand in their truth, to have transformational experience, to be calm, to be centered, to have abundance in all areas of their life without anxiety and stress, which is fantastic. Karen has experienced an impact of trauma and has worked through that and is continually, as a work in progress, as it always is, to make sure that she's not just talking the talk, but walking the talk as well, doing what she says for her clients as well. And just before we've come online today, she's given me some really good tips as well as I'm going through that cleansing process as well. So good morning, Karen. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. And it's just wonderful. I'm looking behind you and I see this lovely image of a beautiful heart with a woman's silhouette and a profile just behind you, behind the picture on your wall. And that is just such a lovely symbol to have and just think that we are in the center of the heart, but we're also heart-centered.
That image is my inner child. What happened was I was given guidance to start using inner child within my work. And I have a friend who's an amazing painter. And I simply said to her, please, can you paint me the inner child? And I gave her free rein, no instructions, no nothing. And she came out with that image of the heart with the woman, but the child within the woman. And that's how I work, working with the child within the woman, because when we come back to that child, we can learn so much that we're not aware of about ourselves.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? That somehow that little voice inside us sometimes cries out. And I always think I used to suppress that and try
We
and
all
push it
do.
away. Yeah, very interesting. And I'd love to hear a little bit about the journey because it does sound as if you've had a really wonderful journey to be from where you were to where you are now. So if you could just take us through a little bit of that, that would be fantastic.
Well, at 50, I discovered that my parents had never held me or told me they loved me. It was so normal not to hear the words and not to experience it that I didn't question it. But actually, not being held and not being told you're loved is a form of trauma. It's classed as neglect by the National Society of Protection of Children. And that had basically been my story that I'd been carrying, that I wasn't lovable, that I didn't deserve love. And my relationships with my husband and partner after I divorced my husband was of seeking love. But the love I sought was what I knew was not having love. So they didn't know how to love me. So consequently, unfortunately, my husband was emotionally abusive. He literally stripped me of all my confidence. Not that I had a lot to start with, but he stripped me of all my confidence. And then when I finally divorced him and went with my partner, he was actually physically abusive because that's what he knew of love. And fortunately, it took me a long time to get out of that relationship. But my body kept telling me there was something wrong. I had an autoimmune disease, sorry, I had an autoimmune disease that normally you'd get at 4 years old. I got it at 40. And it was my white cells actually physically attacking my body. So I landed up being unable to breathe. It was a bit like I was on a constant asthma attack because I just could not expand my lungs. It was in my bone marrow. And I went for treatment under the hospital and was actually poisoned by antibiotics. So not only did I have to contend with an autoimmune disease, my body then refused an awful lot of food to the point where I had a choice of 5 pieces of food that I could eat that my body didn't react to. So it's been a journey and a half, as you can hear. So I've had to learn to listen to my body, to understand how my body reacts to food, reacts to water. I cannot drink fizzy drinks. I struggle with any kind of alcohol now. My body just doesn't want it. I used to love drinking, can't drink alcohol anymore. Food-wise, I'm lucky now that I can eat whatever I want, but my body will tell me whether it wants it or not. If it gets upset with me, I know it.
Yes, and thank you for being so open, because Karen, if this resonates with somebody, and I know it resonates with me, I don't know if there was an era of traumatized people in this country from the Second World War, but my parents were very much within that era, and it was actually a badge of honor to say that the family members didn't show demonstrative signs of love or tell each other that they loved them. We don't do that. This was actually the mantra. My family did not do that. And I wonder, generational trauma, how that can actually go on and on and on and on. And congratulations, because it sounds to me like you've actually help break that cycle. And perhaps you've freed those people within that cycle who've gone before by making sure that that is not something that is going to continue from your perspective.
Unfortunately, I don't have children, so I can't pass what I've learnt and experienced onto them through my genes. I just don't have that pleasure. But I am aware that in conversations with, especially with my mother, because my father unfortunately was not the kind of person that would take much note of what I do or what I've learned. But my mother, we had amazing conversations, and she recognized that it wasn't just her generation. Her parents were exactly the same, and parents before that. And it has carried through the generations, and it does continue. And that's one of the reasons why I want to empower women, because I want to break that cycle. Because when a woman works on herself, she actually improves the lives of her children, because they no longer carry the history. And it is a history that's within our genes that keeps getting repeated. But by working on herself, even if those children are already born, she will have an impact on them, because energetically we change the people that are going to come after us.
Yes, and also the relationships that we have outside of our immediate family. I don't have children either, but I know that the relationships and what I give now to people is far more loving and demonstrative and open about the feelings that I have within me that I feel that I can share of a loving nature. And so I believe that that actually helps to transcend if we haven't got immediate loved ones, and I don't have a partner either. So there's the element of the wider circle, the friends and the community that I know now are able to become part of that energy shift that I've experienced. I don't know if that's something that you encounter as well in your journey?
Interesting enough, even though I didn't know my parents didn't love me or demonstrate love, I actually always, even running a network, I would always give the person a hug. I would actually ask, can I hug you? And my close friends, not that I had many until recently, I would always say to them, I love you. I've always done that, but I've never recognized that I was doing that to my friends or colleagues or acquaintances, but I couldn't do that with my own parents. And if I attempted to give my parents a cuddle or a kiss or anything, it's like, oh, what are you doing? Which is quite interesting. But I encourage all my friends to be open and honest with me about how they're feeling. If I upset them, tell me I've upset you. Tell me why I've upset you. What have I done wrong? Because I can only learn how to love through actually witnessing and experiencing their honesty. Because I'm still learning about love. And interestingly enough, I had a recent session with a colleague, and we discovered, for me, love was a word that I just couldn't accept. My physical and emotional reaction to the word love was off the scale negative. So now I use the word nourish because that resonates with my body and how I feel about love. I love to nourish my friends. I love to nourish my clients, and I love to nourish myself now.
I think we're on a similar pathway at the same similar time, actually, Karen, because as we were just off air, just to share with the listeners, I've not been very well over the last few weeks, and I've been blessed, but not by accident. I've worked at this to make sure that I was okay from being healthy and what I eat and how I exercise and my mindful practices, etc., especially after the nervous breakthrough, which was a few years ago now. But this illness has taken it to a different level. And the amount of self-care, and this is really important in the context of what we talk about here about caring for those that care for others. I am giving myself the word nourishment, which is actually the real thing, the food that I eat, the breathing that I'm conscious now of, because I wasn't conscious of my breathing before. I know that might sound mad, but it was just something that was an autopilot and I never paid any attention to it. And now I'm thinking about my breath work. The fact of my lifestyle and how it supports my own well-being. What you've been able to do in this few short sentences, Karen, and thank you, is you brought it into context that actually I'm taking the love of myself without that being narcissistic, the love of my wonderful self to another level. So thank you for expressing that. And for anybody listening, when we often care for those, and I'm not sexist at all, but often it's the role of the female to be the carer. And often the way in which people view us as being worthy is how much we give to others. Whereas the empowerment for ourselves and what we give to ourselves, I'd love your thoughts on how you help women to take away the guilt or the shame of thinking about themselves as the primary object to care for within our journey.
It's a good question. I think it's the recognition that if you do not care and love yourself, how can you expect anyone to care and love for you? Because what you put out is what you get back. So if you're putting out all this energy, I'm caring for you, I'm doing this for you, I'm not looking after myself, you're actually telling everyone else to treat you the same. That it's okay to not look after yourself. And that's one thing I recognized is I've actually stepped away from my family because Unfortunately, I have a brother who's very narcissistic. And it was like everything I did for my mother as I wasn't her carer as such, but I was her emotional support. And everything I did for her was always criticized by my brother, was always wrong. He knew best, and yet he had no relationship with her. And I've now unfortunately lost my mother. I lost her in May, and last week we actually finally got round to scattering her ashes. But it gave me that permission to step away totally. My mother doesn't need me anymore, and I was the first to admit that it was a relief not to have to be there for her, that I could actually focus totally on myself. And then to finalize her ashes and to know that now I do not need to go back into his energy for any reason at all. It's like I've opened myself up to truly being loved, whether by my friends or for myself. And I can't tell anyone enough that if you're in that kind of relationship, there is no reason to feel guilty for walking away, because you are doing a favor to yourself by doing so.
I think that will resonate with a lot of people, and it's easier said than done. Um, it's as we evolve in life, as we see things as they are rather than how we perhaps perceive them to be, when we know that we can't fix anybody or anything, the only person that we can work with is ourselves. We have to let go of trying to put square pegs in round holes, because it's a futile exercise and it causes a lot of issues and anxiety and hurt. And from what you've said, that journey, sometimes it can be a relief almost instantly when you realize that the weight has been lifted from your shoulders. And I think that I'd love to hear your views on relationships and how you help in your work with women to help them overcome the fact that it's their fault that it didn't work out.
Well, the first thing I would do is challenge the fact that how can they be responsible for somebody else's actions? Because it takes two to damage a relationship. You're not going to damage a relationship other than the fact that you believe you're not good enough. So you automatically start creating scenarios where you're pushing the person away. However, that is often down to the fact of how you view yourself and how you love yourself. But when a relationship starts to break down because somebody is narcissistic or just generally unable to give that love that you're seeking, or give the love that you know but is not serving you, it's important to recognize that we have to put ourselves first. And yes, that is challenging. And I'm the first to admit I struggled terribly with recognizing that I needed to look after myself first. It was a real battle for me, especially in my abusive relationship with my partner. It was like, but if I love you more, you'll be kinder to me. But it doesn't work like that. If anything, it made me more vulnerable because he would not recognize that I was trying to support him. He just felt that I was trying to control, and he did not want control. But I wasn't. I was just trying to demonstrate that actually I was worth being cared for, but my demonstration was just to try and encourage him to be better instead of recognizing I had to be better myself.
And what you've touched upon is the perception
Mm.
between two people. I'd love for you to unpack that a little so that listeners can get to grips with the fact that people see things from different viewpoints.
Okay. Let's let's take an example. He was abusive. He had a Jekyll and Hyde character in the sense that if he drank alcohol, and unfortunately he also did drugs, if he took drugs or drank too much alcohol, he would become a very, very physically abusive. And I used to think if I submitted to not saying anything, to just being quiet and just letting him get on with drinking and taking his drugs and playing very loud music, despite the fact I absolutely hated all of it. And it irritated, obviously, my neighbours because loud music penetrates. It would be fine. But I started to realise that in actually submitting, I was encouraging him. Now, I took the risk and stood up for myself. I would say to anyone, assess the situation. Please do not become a victim because you decide that you want to take control of your life. I chose to, I suppose it was my way of putting a stop to it. I become very angry. Anger can serve, but it can also harm. But in becoming angry, I shocked him because I'd been so submissive. And then suddenly there was this raging person that was actually stating, "You're not doing this to me anymore." It was a shock to me. It was certainly a shock to him. But it was like a turning point because his perception of me being submissive changed. And it wasn't just I become angry when he was drinking or taking the drugs or threatening me. It was like, I'm not tolerating you, so I'm going to become stronger in expressing what I needed to express. And it was like, you're not coming in. You go off to your friends. You stay away until you're sober. And it changed our relationship. In actually standing up to him in that way, he began to change himself because he started to recognize that he couldn't bully me anymore. He couldn't threaten me in the same way anymore. But as I say, it's important to recognize the situation. If it's going to cause you more pain, more physical harm, or anything like that, please don't attempt to do that. Please just get yourself out of the relationship. Because if you're in that kind of relationship, you need to get yourself out of it. I was lucky in the sense of I was aware that I was awakening to my own power. But sometimes we're not strong enough to cope with that awakening, and it actually can harm more than it helps.
That's very wise, yes. And, our safety is paramount, our physical safety, our mental safety. Um, we are worthy
Mm.
of safety and to be with people who nurture that safety and who nourish us. And however much a hold these types of characters have on us, because a lot of people say, just leave. Well, if it were that simple, there would be no issues, would there? And we do have domestic violence all over the world, and so it's not that easy when you're going through it. And I understand it from personal experience as well. psychological abuse, all of that kind of thing as well. You don't realize that you've fallen into something that you find very difficult to get out of. So if anybody's there, don't feel ashamed. Don't feel that you are worthless and that you're the only one that can't do anything about this. We both understand that it's not easy, especially if there are children, financially, culturally, etc. But we are so wonderful, and the miracles that we are, we deserve to be safe and nourished and loved, depending on the words that resonate with you. So yeah, and there are places where you can seek help and maybe get out. And it's then having the will to make sure that these people don't come back in our lives, because in a lot of cases they need their supply, and if we've become their supply, they will do all sorts of weird and wonderful things to try
Mhm.
and hook us back in again. And so it's being strong, because my perception is if somebody's done it once, they will do it again. And it's not two strikes and you're out. For me, it's now one strike and you've gone. Because if we get older, we're not playing around as kids anymore. Um, Karen, on a different note, slightly, I'd love for you, because you've touched upon this standing up in your truth and your power. What is your perception and your thoughts about how you help ladies set boundaries for healthy relationships and for healthy relationships with themselves?
It's understanding what you want from your life. It's recognizing your value. It's also knowing yourself. What, for me personally, I will see both sides of the coin in a relationship. I can see from their perspective, but I can also see from my own. I can see the bigger picture and I can see the detail. That's who I am as a Gemini. We see both sides of the coin. Boundaries, I recognize, is something that once you know yourself, once you recognize your values, you can then start to say, I'm not prepared to accept this. This is my limit. This is my bottom line. Do not exceed it. But it takes time to understand what is important to you, what is acceptable. Because if you've been through that kind of relationship where you have surrendered to their control, you probably have no boundaries at all. So you have to start stepping back and saying, well, I accepted this. Why did I accept it? What is it that I need to now start recognizing I really want in my life? And if that means I don't get involved with people like that, that's my boundary. But it takes time to understand that. You can't just say, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. It took me a long time to actually put a boundary in place where my mother was concerned, because I just wanted to help her and support her. Because as the middle child, the second or the first girl, it fell on me to be there for her. My circumstances gave me that opportunity because I had no partner, so I had the time, etc. But it still took me a long time to recognize that she was actually draining my energy because I was giving so much. And that took a long time to actually state that I'm not prepared to do this anymore. That became my boundary of how much I was prepared to give before I said no.
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty and your candor. And so much of what you've said resonates with me personally. And I know it will with a lot of listeners, because we are the human condition. And I know that we're unique in the own experience that we have of it. But this does the rounds all the time. And it goes through all different guises and spreads through all different cultures and religions and the sexes, etc. And when it happens to us personally, it can feel like the first time anybody's gone through it. But wonderful thing is about this conversation, hopefully, it shows that people aren't on their own, and others have gone and are going through this situation as well. Um, Karen, to wrap up this conversation, which has been absolutely wonderful, thank you. What would you say is your understanding of caring for yourself so that you can care for others? What does it mean to you?
It means giving myself the space and time to take care of myself in the sense of if I need to sleep, I sleep. If I need to eat certain foods, I eat certain foods. If I want to go out, I go out. If I want to work extra time, that's my choice. It's very much about making choices that come from your heart, not from your mind.
And that brings us back very nicely to this wonderful picture that you've got behind you of the heart and the woman and the inner child. Because when we do come think from our hearts, that's where the magic happens. Well, that's where it's happened for me. And it's been such a wonderful conversation. I know that we will be speaking again very shortly. I'm sure people will want to have your details. How do they get hold of you, Karen?
They can go to my website at karenbashford.com. There's resources. You can access me there. You can see my journey, more of my journey and such like. So yeah, please reach out there or LinkedIn at Karen Bashford Empower You. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being such an amazing special guest. And we'll speak again very shortly. And to everybody there, thanks so much for listening. Without you, it's for us to spread our voices to help as many people, touch as many people as we can, spread it out that we're not alone and we're doing a great job. Even if things look really tough, you're doing a great job. You've got there, you're where you should be, and we can change. Always we can change. The situation is if it isn't one that we want and that we're getting that nourishment from, we can change it. So until the next time, take care, carry on caring, and see you all very soon. Bye bye now.
Bye bye.